for this. So quarterbacks, let's go through them. So I know there's another guy in here. I didn't put him on in the picture. It's all right. He ain't making the roster. So let's look at. So we have quarterback room, the obvious two: Bryce Young, Andy Dalton, and then we have our good old Jake the Snake Plumber, who, you know, showed progress through preseason last year. I know I was pretty damn hard on that dude. Deservedly so. He was terrible at Louisville. But let's talk about our grades. So Ricky, I teetered with this. I went back and forth. I wanted to put like A minus, and then I'm like, nah. I kept going back and forth with it. So I was shocked you had a higher grade than both me and Bryson, because I feel like we've been over the last several months have been riding that train a little bit harder than you have, but I'm curious to see what your reasoning is behind that A. So let's go with the grade first. We'll answer the question after.
Yeah, so I gave the A, and it is primarily based off of Bryce Young. I didn't do the thing with the whole room so necessarily with the quarterbacks, and for good reason, because one of the reasons I like Bryce Young so much is the durability, is his availability, is the toughness that he shows. So I graded this mostly off of Bryce Young, but I did factor in Andy Dalton to an extent, because I think that when you look at Andy Dalton, man, if he's just your backup, I'm not talking about a guy who's competing and pushing your starter, right? That's not what I want Andy Dalton to be. If you're in that position, you don't have a good quarterback and you're in a bad place, right? But if he is just sitting behind your quarterback, and your quarterback is a young quarterback, and Andy Dalton has played 13 years of NFL football, right? Whatever it is, over a decade of NFL football. And he has seen just about everything that a defensive coordinator can throw at him, from classic defenses to these new age defenses, because he just played meaningful snaps last season. I think that there is very few backup quarterbacks I would rather have than Andy Dalton. He is not threatening, but he is smart enough and competent enough to help your quarterback. Seems to have a good rapport with Bryce Young, seems to have a good relationship with Bryce Young. But this A, it has nothing to do with Jack Plummer. I'm going to go ahead and just say that. This A has to do with Bryce Young. And I have been watching a lot of last year's film again recently. I do this every time that we get this down little time. I'll jump in there and I'll start watching it again. And I watch film just like regularly, man. When I'm bored, I'll throw on a Panthers game. It's fun to watch. Bryce Young is good as hell, guys. And Bryce Young was good as hell when he came out of Alabama. He was my number one overall prospect in that entire class, not just quarterbacks, but in the entire class. He was who I wanted them to take. I believed in him wholeheartedly. I was extremely nervous about Bryce Young when he looked like he had zero confidence in himself. And he looked like he was panicking on damn near every snap. I was extremely nervous about him getting out of that hole and figuring it out. What I saw is that he not only has climbed out of the hole, he's starting to climb a ladder. And once he got to that flat level ground again, I saw the Bryce Young that I saw at the beginning of his rookie season. I saw a guy that was willing to take chances. I saw a guy that believed in his arm talent. I saw a guy that believed in his offensive line and believed his eyes. What he saw, he believed, and he reacted accordingly. He threw with anticipation instead of being late and causing turnovers. If Bryce Young starts where he finished, if there is no ramp up to get back to this part again, if he starts where he's finished and he continues to ascend, Bryce Young has the ability, in my opinion, to be a top 8-9 quarterback in the NFL this season. And I think that the familiarity with Dave Canales in this system, I think that the familiarity with Jalen Coker, the familiarity with Adam Thielen, the growing rapport with Jatavion Sanders, having a guy like Teteroa McMillan come in and open everything up. Dave Canales finally getting his feet underneath him and knowing what Bryce Young does well, knowing how to deploy the greatest offensive schematics possible to get the most out of Bryce Young. I, honest to God, think that Bryce Young could have a massive season this year, and I'm not going to shy away from it. I really like him. I think that this is going to be the year. We talked about this class, guys. Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, not a single one of them can say that they are definitively better than Bryce Young. Not CJ Stroud either. I don't want to hear that, because he had just as many struggles last year as Bryce had the year before, and he dealt with a less devastating circumstances, in my opinion. And give me the guy who was progressing and getting better, not the guy who went backwards. So give me Bryce Young this year. I got him at like an A+ type quarterback at the end of this year.
Coming in hot. I fucking love it. All right, Bryson, what do you got?
Yeah, I took a slightly different approach than Ricky. I think if I was basing it off of just Bryce Young, it would have been an A grade, potentially an A+ grade. I'm that high on Bryce Young. I took into consideration Andy Dalton as the backup, and if he were to have to play, I think we saw last season his struggles at that position, and then we know Plummer. Hopefully, that man's just holding water, and he's doing nothing more than handing that out to the players. So I think the depth behind Bryce is a little concerning if he were to go down. But again, Ricky made the point. He has been reliable. He has been available. And for someone coming into the league and that being his number one knock is his size and will he last in the NFL? And you got guys like C.J. Stroud who has soreness in minicamp and can't throw. And, of course, Anthony Richardson being sore and coming out because he's tired. I think Bryce Young's just like completely qualmed those concerns in my eyes, at least, of being able to take hits. We saw what happened year one and him being like the second most sacked rookie quarterback of all time and getting up after every single hit. So he's done all that. I think if Bryce Young can go through what he went through last season and being benched and then coming back and playing literally like statistically like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, I don't think there's anything he can't do. I really believe that. That the struggles he went through his rookie season, going into to his second year, being benched, and then not even knowing, like we were talking about Bryce Young being traded, and Bryce Young was like, yeah, what happens, whatever happens. If it's a new opportunity, whatever. And then him coming back in and having that belief in his offensive line that he hadn't had up to that point in his career, having wide receivers that were somewhat decent and playing to the level that he did. I mean, the sky is the limit for him at this position, and it just feels so good because I know all three of us have been supporters of him, like through and through the trials and tribulations. We have believed that something was still inside of him, that what we saw at Alabama can eventually and will eventually come out at the NFL level, and we saw that through the final 10 weeks of last season. So to continue to see that this year, if he builds off of the final 10 weeks and just continues to climb that ladder, the analogy that Ricky used, I mean, I have no issue with what Ricky said about him being a potential top 9, top 8, top 7, top 6 quarterback in this league, because what we saw from him was just phenomenal play, the pocket awareness, the ability to run, take off and run when he needs to get a first down, like the accuracy, the ability to trust your wide receivers and take those chances deep, believing in his offensive line, bringing that offensive line back as a unit, as a whole, is going to be huge for Bryce Young and his belief in himself and his trust with his fellow teammates around him. So if it was just solely based off Bryce, again, it'd be an A for me. But I kind of base my grade off of the depth behind him. God forbid something happens if Andy Dalton's starting. My belief level in this team goes way down. You're only as good as your quarterback, and I don't have much belief in an aging Andy Dalton to win very many games.
Chad, I want to hear from you all too. So give us your grade for this room. I went solely off of Bryce Young. I love Bryce Young. You guys all know that if you've listened to this podcast last couple of years. I thought what we saw the last 10 games of the season is what we saw at Alabama. A guy who looked comfortable, a guy who trusted his offensive line, a guy who trusted his wide receivers, and he looked comfortable. He looked like the Bryce Young we saw for the Crimson Tide. His last 10 games of the year, 2,100 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I know he had a couple rushing touchdowns in the year. He led, I think it was like 6 to 8 game-winning or game-tying drives at the end of the year. Incredible. He also had 26 big-time throws, which was tied for the most in the NFL with Joe Burrow, those last 10-game stretch. He played incredible. My biggest crutch is he needs to do it at the beginning of the season, and we haven't seen it yet. And I'm hoping, and everyone thinks it's just going to translate over. It's just so unknown for me. Is it just going to translate over from that last game where, he went toe-to-toe, or he whooped up on Atlanta and they put up 40 points or whatever it was, big scoring game, a ton of touchdowns, 5 touchdowns, the no-look Steph Curry pass to Tommy Tremble in the end zone. Is that going to translate to week 1? I need to see that, and I think I'd probably bump that up then. But yeah, that's just my biggest concern is Carolina needs to come out hot, and Bryce Young needs to establish that confidence he did at the end of last season earlier in the season. So that is my biggest qualm, I guess, about it. And that's kind of why I took a step back, but I'm not even looking. I think Andy Dalton is a serviceable backup quarterback. If you need a spot starter for a week or two, I trust him. He proved that last year. He can come in and start a game, Chad Henne type in Kansas City, and get you a win. Jake Plummer, guy will be on the practice squad. I ain't worried about it. But Chad, let us know what your grades are. We have 560 some people in here. Not any of you guys have given us a grade. So give us a grade on what you think of this room. Go ahead, Ricky.
Y'all both brought up a good point though, and it's kind of what I was alluding to as well. Is that the start of next season? That's what I'm really like keyed in on, man. I want to see them get off the blocks like hot, and they've got a chance to do it in Jacksonville. But I want to see Bryce if he comes out, man, and he has that confidence, and he continues to keep going up, dude. Opposing teams are in trouble because when he started getting confident, I know that they were playing Atlanta, and Atlanta sucks. Their defense is trash. But the game that he played the final week of football last season was one of the better performances that a Carolina quarterback has ever put on a football field. And we're talking about performances from Cam Newton, the NFL MVP. He did something that Cam Newton didn't do, right? Like this is a real talented number 1 overall pick that a lot of people doubted, but he is aiming this season to remind every single person why he was a consensus number 1 overall pick in that year. And I know that it's convenient, man, to shit on him because he's small and he had an awful like 10 to 14 game stretch between like his week 4 rookie season to the first 2 of his sophomore year. This is a good football player, guys. And like he's a good quarterback. He's a leader. His team has bought into him. All of that off the field stuff really does matter, especially for a young team and a young player.
All right, let's go to the chat, and then we'll answer that question that I posed you guys. So hopefully you thought of something. But Riz, C+. All right.
Not a Zach Plummer fan, huh?
Riz definitely wanted Anthony Richardson. I'll tell you that. No, Michael Cuddy, we appreciate you from Florida. B, Bryce will be a solid QB, but not sure he'll ever match Capital 1 of 1. Still love the guy. James Cody, I believe we're a B+ right now. I also believe the running game and defense will dictate his success. C from Justin K. And Koopa Troopa. Is Koopa like, isn't there a character on
Mario Kart?
Mario Kart. Yeah, okay.
Super Mario.
I knew I wasn't making shit up.
Look how young y'all are. Y'all are talking about Mario Kart. That's an actual guy from Mario, Super Mario Brothers.
Same shit.
I mean, compared to the rest of the league, week 1 probably B-, a big boost because Andy Dalton is the backup.
A big boost because of Dalton. Man, it is crazy. I feel like there are still so many
Riz
fans.
Is a Bryce guy. Okay. All right.
Are you? So just not a Plummer guy. Yeah, okay, I get it.
Well, let's ask this, okay? And I don't know if Ricky or Bryson wants to start here, but what does Bryce Young need to do this year to have a successful season? This could be statistically, this could be wins, this could be whatever you want it to be. But what do you think he needs to do in your mind for him to have a successful year?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm not going to do stats at this point. I think I would need a little bit more time to think about that, really think about it. I think Bryce Young just needs to continue to build off of what he did at the end of last season. I think if he comes out, we talked about it a little bit, but if he comes out versus Jacksonville and, the couple games thereafter, and we see the same struggles that we saw in year 1 and the beginning of year 2, I think that's really concerning. And, I'm going to be kind of leaning towards what Kurtz was talking about is like, okay, like what's going on at the beginning of years to where Bryce doesn't have this confidence and he's continuing to struggle. But I wholeheartedly believe that's not going to happen. I think when you talk about the way players are talking about him in training or in mini camp and OTAs about how he's finally talking shit back to like JC Horn, like that confidence level of Bryce Young we haven't seen in Carolina. So I think he's continuing to build on that. Just taking steps forward, man. Just consistently being a quarterback that doesn't make mistakes. That's not going to hurt your team. If he's like the game manager style quarterback level, and you're leaning on a run game, and your defense is playing significantly better than they were last season, hopefully. I'm not mad at that, but I believe he has the ability to be an impact and be impactful to win games. And, he showed that, like Curtis, you mentioned it when you were talking about him. When this guy has the ball in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes to go, and we have a drive to potentially win the game or tie the game, my confidence in our ability to do that with Bryce Young at the helm is like, I'm just sitting back on the couch. I'm just waiting because I know it's going to happen.
Yep.
I know it's going to happen because Bryce is ice cold, man. So I think
he's got that clutch gene.
He really does. I think he's proven that without a doubt so far in his NFL career. So I think just continuing to take – I know it's kind of a broad statement, but just building off of what he did in the final 10 weeks of last season and being consistent and not having those ins and outs of like, okay, like there's a game with 15 passes, 30 incompletions, 2 interceptions, like continuing to build on the success that he had in the final 10 weeks. Not saying there can't be a bad game. Like, quarterbacks have bad games. Patrick Mahomes has bad games. But just a general consensus of more consistency throughout a season. I think that's the next step for Bryce Young.
I want to see Bryce play better on schedule, because a lot of what we saw and a lot of what we are kind of like going off of as far as like looking at projection, right, for Bryce was what he did under pressure, which, hey, look, he's going to see pressure. They're going to keep blitzing him. But a lot of it was also like second play. That's what Canales calls it, where he's out and he's scrambling and he's creating off of that initial play. And I want to see that tighten up a little bit. Now, I think that some of that is the coaching. Some of that is the surroundings around him. And some of that is game situation, right? If this defense could take a step and Bryce is in different situations, I think you see a different Bryce as well, as far as like deciding when to attack, when to take it's like a game of golf, right, man? Like you got to decide when do you need to try to go for the green and when do you lay up and you take the smart shot. Like sometimes I think that Bryce is such a cerebral guy that he knows that he wants to lay up because he knows that he could get on the green and be in a really good place to tap it in. But he also looks at it and says, but we're down by 13. Like, I can't lay it up and go on an 8-minute drive here when there's 9 minutes left to go and we need 2 scores. And we got to stop it with defense. So the mental part of that, I think, can change with a better defense, better supporting cast, more confident coaching. For Bryce Young, I want to see consistency and accuracy to continue over the middle. I want to see deep passing improve. I want to see deep passing to the sidelines. That's what I want to see. I want to see him leading his receivers, creating that yak opportunity. I think that having T-Mac, getting Xavier Legette on more crossers and in-breaking type of routes, I think that could help a lot with that. I just think that for Bryce Young, man, seeing that confidence that Bryson just talked about, like that is such a huge element for him. And he turned it on. He did it. James Cody brought up something in the chat that I wanted to touch on because it ties into what Bryson was saying and how I feel. Bryce needs to be a game managing quarterback, not the stud. I think if he's Purdy, we're good. If he's got to be Cam, we're in trouble. So part of me agrees with that, James. Part of me thinks that like we're still doing this thing where we talk about Cam only because Cam was like the Superman for the Panthers. But there's a lot of quarterbacks in this league, like a Jalen Hurts, who I think has the same type of role that Bryce Young could have here. He's got talent around him, but if Jalen Hurts isn't sharp and Jalen Hurts isn't good and he's not making timely throws, that Eagles team is beatable. I mean, we saw that against them playing us last season, right? But when I look at Brock Purdy has to be pretty dang good, man. He just got, $270 million from the 49ers? He makes a lot of really big-time throws, but what he doesn't do extremely well is that clutch thing in the playoffs or when it's a big-time game. And so if Bryce Young can be Brock Purdy on schedule through three quarters, right? And then he still has that Bryce Young it factor to finish these games out and to win big games like Bryson was talking about. Dude, $270 million will look like a bargain for Bryce Young in 2 years if that's what we're paying him.
Amen. Well said. I kind of alluded to what I was going with the answer to this question, and Bryce Young needs to start off how he ended last year. We can't go into this 2-3 game stretch where he's throwing multiple picks and they're 0-2 or whatever the case may be. They need to start hot, and they need to win more than 6-7 games this year for me personally. And I think he's going to have a lot to do with that in that winning ability. I know the defense, we all hope they at least come out of the trenches of where they were last year, but that's never a guarantee either. But yeah, I mean, I think that's key. And then for me is Panthers haven't had a lot of games where they've led, and I need to see Bryce Young when they are in the winning corner, in the ring, carrying them to a victory and closing it out, not letting these teams creep back in and, push this game into overtime and then the Panthers squeak. No, he needs to finish games, close it out, and just beat these guys. And that's I think the next step too, is because Carolina has always been playing, it seems like these last 2 years, at least for him, is they've always been playing catch up, and he gets you back into the game. And then, they might crawl, scratch and, fight, and it'll be really close at the end, and then they end up losing. You're like, damn, they almost had it. When they have a lead, I want to see this guy lead this team to victories and not let these other teams crawl back into it. So I think that's the two biggest things for me. But I think for the start of the year, they need to start hot. They can't get into this rut they have the past 2 seasons. So I think that's big. I did like what Ricky said about Hurts, because I do think, and I kind of disagree with James, I do think Bryce Young showed at the end of the season he has this escapability, and he can turn it on to a whole nother level when he gets to that point and when he's comfortable. And I mean, he's sneaky good in certain circumstances where he's making guys miss. Go watch the Milton Williams missed tackle where he finds Lee Gett on a 3rd down or 4th down. I think it might have been in that Eagles game. It was incredible.
Not just Milton Williams. It was Milton Williams and Josh Sweat.
And it was a layered throw. I mean, he was throwing it over a linebacker, trying to fit it in between a linebacker and a safety. I mean, that's beautiful. The shit. Like, and I'm sorry, that's to a whole nother level. That's special. Cam Newton-esque. I think that's sometimes even better than Cam Newton. I think this guy does have he's got a clutch gene. It's special. It really is. And he's already to that point. He's been through some of those experiences. But if he can get on the other side where they're having a lead and then closing those things out, I think that could be huge.
And to your point, Curtis, real quick, about the lead, not only is it Bryce Young, performing and hopefully, to an ability that you're able to win that game, but it'll be interesting to see Dave Canales calling those plays in those situations with the lead. To put Bryce Young in that situation.
Territory.
That's a great point,
if is he a play caller that takes his foot off the gas and okay, we got a lead, let's play safe, or is he a play caller let's step on their throats, we got the lead, let's keep doing what we're doing? So that'll be really interesting to see with Dave Canales.